to work on this, what I would do is polygon primitive cube. I would then probably go to the place where I have the largest volume, and then I would probably start in top view. And the whole objective here is to make the least amount of geometry possible. So I'm selecting my vertices, but I could select edges, right? I'm then going to try to align these lines to the tangent lines. So I'm rotating those sides. The next thing I'm probably going to do is just extrude, right? So I'll probably come down to this face. I'm going to hit Control E, and then I'm going to extrude. So once I extrude, I typically will extrude all the way out to where I need to go. I'll then center it, and then if you hit the scale button, you can then scale this down, right? So now I kind of got roughly the form that I want. Be careful when you scale down. You notice that it actually scaled in all 3 dimensions. I actually didn't want to do that. I just want to scale in. I just want to scale in one direction. So on this gizmo, you have, if you scale the middle, it's going to scale the middle. If I just scale this one, it's only going to scale in 2 dimensions along that axis, right? So now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Control E to extrude. Probably pull this all the way out so I get to, and then center it, and then scale. So if you want to be able to see through to compare what you're doing, you can change this to wireframe mode, right? You can change wireframe mode by hitting 4 on the keyboard, right? Another option, you can go into shading and make it X-ray. I think X-ray is probably the easiest way to see it. Or you could change the material itself, but I think we'll show that in a different tutorial. So next, what do you think I would do to get these in-between curves? What did you guys do?
Insert loop.
Exactly. Mesh, insert edge loop. And again, I want to make sure that I'm not scaling all of it. I'm just scaling in 2 dimensions, not in 3 dimensions. And then if I hit G on the keyboard, I'm going to get another loop. And then I'm going to just do the same thing. Right? Computer froze. So really quickly, you can get these organic forms in Maya. And then what you want to do is you want to basically be checking in different views. So now I'm going to go back to this view, and then maybe I'm going to, so for this, I probably want to have an edge loop that's going to be in the center line, because what I want to do is I want to create an arc that matches this one. And in order to do that, I can't just rely on these edges, because then I won't have anything happening in the middle. So I need to make a point in the middle. So I'm going to add an edge loop now along this path. And I'll try to align it so that the highest point is aligned with the highest point here, right? So that way I can go into vertex mode and I can start to modify this accordingly. So one thing that you can do, which is really helpful, is you can, so we had snapping to the grid on up here, but you have another type of snapping, which is snap to curves and snap to points. You can create snap to points just by pressing V. So if I hit V on the keyboard, you notice that this turns into a circle. That means that snapping mode is on, right? So I'm going to hit V, and then I'm going to drag. And now if I hover my mouse over a point, it's going to align directly to that point, right? So if I want this one to be aligned here, I can align it like that. Same thing for this one. I could hit V, select it, hit V, and then I can get to that point, right? So really quickly, I can have this organic form, right? Let's say I want to do the same thing to the other side, but maybe I don't want to. I don't want to model it from scratch. What can we do? We can go to Edit Mesh or Mesh Mirror, right? So first thing we have to do is we have to switch the axis position to object, and then we have to change our direction to positive, right? And I'm going to put merge border on do not merge border, and I'm not sure why I can't cut geometry off. Okay, and make sure you have cut geometry off, otherwise it starts to delete your geometry. So now I have a pretty decent thing to work from, so I can, so we looked at combining it, but now we can also separate. So if we go to mesh and hit separate, we now have two different objects, right? In this case, our center pivot is now off to the side. So if I want to change the pivot to be directly on this, I'm going to do modify center pivot so that it's in the center. Right? And then I can start editing this here. So I can go to my loops, double click my edge loop, and start, modifying it much quicker than if I was just maybe starting from scratch. In some cases it might be more challenging to do this, in other cases it might be better to do it like this, but just use your best judgment what's best for the situation. In this case I don't think it's too bad. So one thing that can be annoying is like if I want to move this edge to right here and I have to go like this, that's kind of slow, especially if you have a really complex form. One thing you can do is if you hit W and you right click, you have these options, right? So similar to the component mode selection, you have this axis selection, right? So all I'm doing is, again, I have W, move tool, I'm holding W, and then I'm left clicking, axis, and then I have this custom, set the edge. So now I can select that edge and I can just move along that edge directly. So that one's really helpful. Another thing you can do is that if it's an edge loop, which because we mirrored this, we might not have the geometry. Poly split. Okay, so let's see. Let's just do it on this one. If you don't mirror it, then you're gonna have all the history. So in this case, if we select these edges, so you notice we have all these different things that we did to the geometry. So in this case, we have a poly split that's basically an edge loop, and you have this weight for the edge loop. So depending on where it is, so this edge loop was created in the center, so that's this edge loop that we're referring to. And you can say, so it's from 0 to 1. You can say, like, I want this to be, only 10% of that curve, so I can make it 0.1. And it's going to move to, like, this side. So, like, let's say this is 0, and this side is 1. If I did 0.9, it's going to move to that side. And you notice because we mirrored this object, this one is copying the same, right? This is also animatable. You can also animate this too. So like I could say, okay, set key. I could then move this to, let's say, 120. I can make this 0.1, and I can do set key, right? So like you can animate everything, right? If you want this to like oscillate, so like go forward and back, or you want to change the frame rate, because right now the frames are going pretty fast, you have this option for frames per second. Right now it's at 24. But if we click this little man running from the wheel of death, you can change it to real time somewhere. Animation, settings, I guess it's time slider. Oh, here, playback speed. You have play every frame, or you have 24 frames per second. So let's just switch to 24. and then when you play, it's going to be smooth, right? Was anybody able to get at least one half modeled?